So how widespread is plagiarism in academia? Well, I have an academic here who's going to explain it to us.
That is a
Peter.
thank you. Great to be here. That is the $1,000,000 question. How widespread is it?
Before we get into it, do you want to give us your background? Just so people can understand how we became friends, how
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we've known each other a long
yeah.
time, friends for a long time. So I taught at Portland State University, taught philosophy. I did my dissertations in the prisons, and I worked with increasing prisoners' critical thinking and moral reasoning and abilities. And I resigned from Portland State because it was a woke cesspool. And then I've written books about how to have impossible conversations, and I travel around the world, and we do with Travis and Reed, and who's the president of Street Epistemology. That's basically it. The plagiarism issue is, it will be, my prediction to you is, I'm a big fan. Don't tell anybody how smart you are. Make predictions, as my friend Michael Shermer says. I predict that this is going to be a massive scandal.
I think it
And
already is.
an epic scandal. Yeah. So okay. So let's talk about the elements of the scandal.
Yeah.
First is Claudine Gay.
Yeah.
So she herself is, oh, and that's fantastic. So this is exact. So your viewers will see this, right?
Yeah.
So the viewers should see it. So they can look for themselves, right? So they can compare what she wrote and what other people wrote. And I want to say something that gets lost in this conversation. So plagiarism is basically the idea that you steal someone else's work, intellectual work, and you don't take credit for it. Yeah. But this is what's left out of this conversation that's super important. So,
hi folks, sorry to interrupt the video, but I just wanted to announce that we have a new line of merch in our merch store. The merch store was kind of empty for a while, and so I thought, right, okay, what do I actually want on shirts? And so I just went through some of the most epic and true things that I think that historical people have said, and John managed to make an amazing set of merch out of it. And we will have extra things coming in the store, such as posters for these to go on. Thanks for everything, folks. Now back to the video.
When people write a dissertation today, they can just put things on a screen and copy and paste, etc. But back when she did it, you had
to
books.
write it by hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of intentionality to that theft that's absent in the context today. Okay, so that's one thing. Your question is an excellent one. I don't know the answer to it, but I'm going to guess. In the humanities, I would guess 7 to 9% of dissertations are plagiarized.
That seems high.
That's very high. In the sciences, I think it's less, but I think data fraud is a different issue. Now, I could be way off on that if it's hovering around the 15 or 20%. And what I mean is like Claudine Gay, black and white. And so the other thing is that's hard to imagine is she even plagiarized her acknowledgments. Like, thank you to so-and-so. She plagiarized. Okay, so that's one level of corruption.
Yeah.
Another level of corruption is that universities are making it more difficult to find dissertations now. They're basically doing the best they can to hide them. Now, why are they doing that? Well, they're doing that because they know that plagiarism is rampant. Yeah. And again, that my figure of 7 to 9 could be wrong. It could be 15 or 20.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be huge. Okay, so then you have universities attempting to hide these plagiarized dissertations. That's another thing. But then there's yet another kind of corruption, and that is that there are entire fields that are corrupt.
Yeah.
Anything with studies in it, as a general rule, is corrupt. These are ideological fields that push certain narratives. They're inherently fraudulent. So you have layers of corruption and fraud, and these are our engines of knowledge production. These are teaching our kids. So when I say burn them down, I mean actually like that's it. Like, why would you want to have something in your society teaching people bad ways to think about fallacious conclusions?
Yeah. And burning it down is, I mean, the response to this was brilliant. The first one was, well, you're only doing this because she's a black woman. And
right. Mark Lamont Hill. A lot of people said that.
Well, the response to that is, no, we hired her because she was a black woman.
That's correct.
The reason she's being given a pass by you guys is because she's a black woman.
That's correct. And so we should talk about that. So in academia, 7 publications in 7 years gets you tenure. Now, one thing that I recommend the audience do is you go to scholar.google.com, put in my name, put in anybody's name who's an academic, put in Jordan Peterson's name, put in Steven Pinker's name, put in Foucault's name. Those people have extraordinarily high, what's called an H index, the number of citations, prestige of the journals. Claudine Gay, she doesn't even have a profile.
Oh, really?
Her citations are high, for the articles she's written, but the articles themselves are basically bogus. They're about make-believe land. And so there's a small cadre of people who keep citing other people in these make-believe disciplines, and that artificially inflates the citation rating. But she only has 11 publications. I mean, when we did fake papers, we wrote 20 papers in a year. 7 were accepted before we got busted by the Wall Street Journal. So, I mean, 11 papers is nothing for a full professor at Harvard. She's making $900,000 a year. And instead of firing her, she keeps her job. She keeps her university position.
But it's worse though, isn't it? Because the ranks closed around her.
100%.
It was all of the academics, the entire faculty of Harvard, the board of directors, and the media.
Correct.
The wider, and Obama, yeah, like the wider circles all closed ranks to protect her. Even though, I mean, this is just, I would be deeply embarrassed.
It's a disgrace.
This was me, and I'm not an academic.
Yeah.
So like the fact that they're doing this shows that this has just become a them and us.
Yeah.
Situation.
So think about this. They conducted an investigation, Harvard, internal investigation of plagiarism. They found her innocent before they even investigated.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. The level of corruption is astonishing. Yeah. And this is Harvard. This is not some rinky-dink community college where everybody's buddying around. This is I don't know if you want to say Western world, but certainly one of the top universities in the Western world.
Theoretically, it's one of the top universities. Historically, it was one of the top universities.
Okay, so there we go.
Yeah,
there we go. So what do we do? So what are the consequences of that? And again, I don't want people who are watching this just to think, oh, wow, there are a bunch of people who are plagiarized. This is a corruption scandal. That's why this is so interesting. Bodies of literature corrupt, people hiding dissertations, people hide because of basically an immutable characteristic. And it's even been floated. What if a certain percentage of people, what if a higher percentage of people fit in an ethnic demographic who have plagiarized? What do we do then? Like, well, I mean, imagine even asking that kind of question. Like, imagine what you would have to do to even think, like, to break society up into racial categories in the first place. If you didn't plagiarize your dissertation, you've got nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
I put my plagiarism, my dissertation. So one more thing. So this is a very complicated area, so I'm speaking quickly. But it's not as simple as, and if people are watching this, it's not this that you can go out and become an internet sleuth and track down people's dissertation and put them through plagiarism checker. The reason you can't do that is because there are false positives and false negatives. And before, is a very serious accusation. That's like like the most serious of accusations, which Claudine Gay tried to decrease the standards for plagiarism because she knew she was guilty. Okay. So the problem is, it's not just like you go to this program called Turnitin or what have you. And if you do that, you have to physically, like this is what you need to do. You need to take the paragraphs and put them next to each other and go through those. Because if you don't do that, you don't want a situation in which we start accusing people of things they haven't done it, and then the public will think, oh, well, it's no big deal.
And just to be clear as well, the reason that this is a genuine issue is because in almost every field, there are going to be certain formulas to describe a thing that people use, right? So you might be saying a Western liberal democracy or something like this, and it's not inconceivable that you'll say something like, well, I think Western liberal democracy is a good thing. And that's not plagiarism that lots of people will have written that sentence. Right. And so because there's a certain formulation of the concept that you're putting across.
Okay.
So it's very easy for people to sort of duplicate that without it being plagiarism.
Okay. So this is how I think we should think about this. Let's say, I assume they call fire. You have fire departments here. Is that what they call?
Okay. We have fire.
Oh, cool. Well, I don't know if they're called fire departments. So some of the words.
Fire stations.
Okay, fire. So you have fire stations, and I assume I'd be shocked if this were not the case. You have to take some kind of fire person's exam.
I imagine. I've never been a fireman.
I don't know, but I would be. And the idea of the exam is that it tests things necessary for you to know how to discharge your primary function, which is to put out fires. Okay.
I'm assuming that's the way it works.
Everything I've said is totally reasonable.
Seems so.
Okay. So now let's think about how completely deranged this is. So we have a situation in which a non-trivial number of people who firemen, firewomen, what have you, firefighters, have lied on the examination. Yep. And the examination is necessary for you to put out fires.
Yep.
So what should the fire, if there's a chief municipality of governing firefighters, I have no idea, but what is the reasonable response of these people? Any sane person would say, well, we don't want people to die in fires. That's the whole point of the fire department. So when you're going to root out the corruption, we're going to find out who cheated. We're going to conduct a thorough investigation, and we're going to just boot you. That's it. There's no appeal. If you're guilty of not the plagiarism is a parallel, but if you're guilty
cheating on the fire exam,
then you're out. There's no ifs, ands. I don't care if you're a midget. I don't care if you're, well, I don't care what you are. If you cheated on the fireman's exam, you're not going to be a firefighter. Like that's it. Your days are over. So when you do that, you restore confidence in the fire department among the citizens who believe the fire department can actually put out fires.
Yeah. And that is not what's happened in this case.
No, the opposite has happened. The universities have lost even more legitimacy.
And I think it's also worth noting that this was not actually originally a plagiarism scandal. What this originally was is a really strange anti-Semitism scandal, where for some reason the president of Harvard was like, no, actually you can chant for the death of Jews as long as it's not at a Jew. It's like, right, okay, that's context, that's really weird because, you know, in every other case, I mean, we've experienced this personally when we're doing, it's not context dependent, actually. It's in any time, in any place, for any reason. So, okay, actually in every other case, it's not context dependent, but in this case, when it's defending your radicalized students, it becomes very context dependent. And that's what they all ranked around. And so there's people like Chris Rufo who found, well, hang on a second, there is another reason to get rid of her. If for some reason screaming anti-Semitic chants on Harvard is fine, well, why have we got all these plagiarists? And then you see the backlash and the sort of kickback from all that. So, well, I mean, plagiarism is not a big deal. No, it is a massive deal, as you explained. But then they started, I saw them sort of saying, well, yeah, but this means that everyone's going to have to be checked. And it's like, good thing we've got AI then, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, so let's talk about that. So part of that endemic corruption is then universities now rushing to change the plagiarism standards.
Yes.
So just again, the analogy breaks down with the fire department at some point because you don't rush to change the standards.
They do rush to change the standards because what they say is, well, we're not getting enough women and minorities because they're not passing the fitness test, and so they lower the fitness.
Right. So that would be
exactly a parallel.
Okay. So it's
being done for the same reasons. It's the same ideology that controls
the same reasons, and I would argue that the same consequence applies. Is that people have less confidence in the institutions to discharge their primary missions.
Well, why would you have any confidence? Because the people have been caught in the act of cheating, and they've been caught for something else. But but we can show that they are cheating and they're not doing their job sufficiently well, even with the moral question taken away. And then they've said, well, no, we're going to double down and just say we don't have to do as much as we need to do anyway. And so they're deliberately saying, no, our institution is actually not really fit for purpose.
100%. And just to be crystal clear, these are not your rules. These are not my rules.
Yeah. They're their own rules.
These are their rules. These are the pre-existing rules that they agreed to.
But you know that they don't care about consistency.
No, that's the problem.
So I'm wondering, what do you think will be the other than people are already losing interest and confidence in these institutions. So what do you think will be the practical implications? Because as I've said to you, I think that they'll just move on from this. I think they'll say, well, we already know objectivity is this, white Western construct. We already know the scientific method is based on white supremacy. This is what they say.
Right.
So how do you defend against that?
Okay. So you have a number of different responses to that. All those people who go through Crazy Town and make those arguments, the vast majority of people are sane and don't believe that. The overwhelming majority. So they're going to see that conspicuous, naked ideological stance, and they're going to say, hey, wait a second. Should we really be paying X number of hundreds of thousands of dollars for our kids' education? Should we what are they really getting out of this?
And not just that, donors as well, right? Because then you've got very Harvard graduates who have done very well for themselves and then donate money to the university because of the
that's the other thing, the donors.
I was just going to say, but will they? Because we both know people in Portland, Oregon that still live there and they still think that defunding the police was a good idea, even though more black people died as a result.
Right.
They still believe it. I mean, it's so insane. They just doubled down.
I haven't got any data, but I am absolutely certain that there were donors pulling out of Harvard.
We know that. They lost over $1 billion in their endowments.
Well,
we know that. So I heard Harvard described as a hedge fund with a school attached to it.
There is definitely an argument.
Yeah. So the question is, what do we do as a society? So what do? We are at the precipice, and that's assuming that it's 7 to 9%. Again,
It could be
where
massive.
I would be flabbergasted if that number were under 5%. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I'll take you to the best dinner ever if that number is under 5%.
Yeah.
So what do we do as a society? I think you only have two choices. You either try to, and this is what Rufo wants to do. In full disclosure, Rufo is a friend of mine.
Let's go full spectrum on this.
He's a friend of mine.
I like
I disagree with him on this. I hope he's successful, but I don't think ultimately he'll be a success. We'll see.
Yeah.
You have two choices. One is you try to reform the current institutions. That is primarily, who's the governor of the state in the United States, who's the president. That would be much more difficult under a Democratic administration.
Yeah.
Or you try to do what I'm doing, which is to build new things, which is like the University of Austin, and there are other institutions that are trying to be rebuilt. Now, what's interesting about this is that, and I interviewed Chris about, like, do you want me to succeed? Do you want these, like the University of Austin, to succeed? And he said, absolutely.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't he want it to succeed? Like, that creates competition. It creates a kind of vibrant educational marketplace where people can choose. Jonathan Haidt, the sociologist from New York, NYU, talks about this. Do you want to go to a social justice institution, or do you want to go to a truth-based institution? So if you want to go to a social justice institution, we'll see when the reality of the marketplace sets in.
Well, that's the problem, though, isn't it? Because they get huge amounts of government funding as well.
Okay. So that's the other thing. So what do we?
A market wouldn't sustain this.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. What do we do about if we know that these institutions are fundamentally corrupt? And that was the problem when we wrote the fake papers with the grievance studies thing. We just did it too early. Like, it just wasn't in people's consciousness. Like,
same with Alan Sokal, wasn't it?
Sokal,
in the 90s. Yeah, I mean, that's way earlier, but
we just had dinner with him. He lives here in London.
Makes exactly the same point.
Yeah, he made the same point. He published in a piece, and if you're not familiar with the Sokal hoax, you should totally look into it. It's fascinating. Postmodern gibberish he put in.
Yeah.
So the question is, what do we do? We have this range of options: build new things, ignore the problem, which I don't think. The only people who want to ignore the problem are the same people who want to deny the problem, or the same people who occupy.
They're the same people benefiting from the problem.
Well, they're benefiting because they get to have their little fiefdoms. They get to discharge their moral impulses into journals that are completely corrupt. They get to indoctrinate kids in this ideology mill. The students are the ones who suffer from this.
Yeah.
The students are thinking that they're getting something real, but they're being lied to.
Yeah.
It's total BS. The whole thing is complete madness.
And they come out without any actual tangible skills from these mills.
Yeah, that's why. So my daughter is about to go to college, and I told her, go to vocational. Not only is there no shame in vocational education, those are honorable, good money.
Yeah.
Make your own hours. Be a plumber, a carpenter, electrician. Can't speak in the UK and the US.
Oh, no, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, we desperately need those. These are highly profitable. So if you're out there, you're thinking, should I go to college? Think about vocational school.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, paradigms can change in the university, but things will always break. So,
Correct.
They'll always need people to fix things and build things.
Yeah.
So do consider them. But this whole thing has just been a massive eye opener, I think, for a lot of people, right? Because I mean, like, no one would have thought,
trusted, right?
No one thought over an academic scandal, an anti-Semitism scandal, there would become this giant academic corruption that's been unraveled. And so what I'm interested in is actually where this goes, because you've got someone like Chris Rufo who's like, okay, well, I'm going to literally check as many of them as I can. And actually, with the advent of AI, that becomes a practical endeavor.
Well, I'm working with someone. Well, I'm advising someone who's doing that now. He's building a system to search dissertations by the tens of thousands.
Yeah.
And it's probably be 8 months before that is out. So I personally am not doing that, but I want to make sure to help him to make sure that that's done right, or help them. They're very well financed. In 8 months, we're going to see what that number is.
Yeah. And that could be really
Could be, but I'm telling you for a fact, it is not going to be under 5%.
Oh yeah.
So that even if it were 5%, which it won't be, that's 1 in 20. 1 in 20 are people liars and frauds and cheaters.
And there's just no benefit in a normal world to allowing those people to continue to prosper.
100%.
No benefit.
But not only was Claudine Gay allowed, she kept her position at $900,000 a year as a professor.
And this is the thing. Like, okay, Claudine Gay eventually had to resign as the president of Harvard. But what about the other people who totally and unconditionally supported her? No, they have to go as well. All of the people,
they're complicit.
Exactly, they're all complicit. And so ideally, you would have them all fired. They would all have to.
Yeah. So to be full disclosure, all the cards on the table, I did not want Claudine Gay fired.
No?
Nope. I
Why
thought
not?
she was the president Harvard deserved. I thought she was
Well, yeah, okay,
the perfect embodiment. We want a cheater. We want an ideologue. We want someone who's underqualified. I couldn't possibly think of a better person to occupy that position.
That is a good point. But someone who wanted to reform the institution.
Which I do not, but I want to burn them down. I've been very honest about that from the beginning.
But if you did want it reformed, you'd want every single one of these people in this chain to be
correct. Okay. Operating under the assumption that we want to reform the institution, she would have to be fired and removed from her university position. She won't be because of her immutable characteristics. All of the people who are complicit in this, they'd off all of the people who, when she was cleared in the investigation that I mentioned, that found her innocent before she even, those people need to be fired. You would need to clean house to a level they simply, and all the people, the black academicians that she persecuted, like Roland Fryer, he would have to be, all of the Carol Swain, all of those people would have to be reinstated to Carol Hoven.
But it would go further, like the administrators who didn't blow whistles, who aren't necessarily academics, but are the ones responsible for like the machinery of the thing. Maybe they are implicated as well, because if you can see corruption happening in front of your eyes, you have an obligation to be a whistleblower.
100%.
So like even the non-academics who are just doing the functionary work of the university, sorry, you might be implicated in this as well.
Yeah. And
it would have to be a root and branch tearing up of them.
Okay. So think, like really sincerely think about this. The reason, if this were the fire department or the ambulance service, of course this would be done. Like,
well, you would think so, but actually in our country, it's not.
Okay. Well, of course.
It's probably the same in your country as well, for diversity reasons.
Okay. Well, that's the same contaminant.
It is
That's
exactly
the same ideological contaminant. So the fact that this is not being done goes to show you, and then goes to show you not only how deep the corruption is, but the fact that it's at its root, undergirding the whole thing is the ideology. And so here's in a nutshell the reason I don't think the universities can be reformed. One, you can't have DEI and free speech. Harvard still has massive DEI universities. All these institutions spend millions of dollars, massive. The other thing is you have people who have jobs for life. How on earth are you going to reform that?
How do you hold them accountable?
You can't. They have jobs for life. So what are you going to do? Well, you burn the whole thing down. You don't send your kids there. You send them to vocational education. You send them to Ralston College, University of Austin. You send them to Elon Musk is building a new school in Austin. Who else is just talking to?
Yeah, there are a bunch of people who are making positive
Mark Andreessen is talking about building new schools now. So you have this billionaire class wants to build new schools. Those will be alternatives to the existing educational infrastructure. So if you want to send your kid to a school in which not only will they'll kind of come out damaged in a sense because they'll believe things that are false. There's simply no evidence for these things.
Like literally handicapped by a worldview that makes them believe that they can't achieve.
Yeah, racism is the ordinary and everyday state of affairs. It's ever present. That equity-based thinking,
race, gender, sexuality,
gender is assigned at birth.
The whole spectrum of it is designed to make them think that there's no progress to be made within the system themselves.
That's correct.
And you are creating self-fulfilling prophecies, but not only that, you're depriving them of the necessary tools with which to prosper in the system that they operate in.
So the reason that's particularly insidious is that they're going to these lead institutions. They think that they're learning something. They think they're becoming more knowledgeable. They're taking things that they've learned that are clearly false. That is simply, not only is there no evidence for it, it's actually evidence against, like microaggression.
Oh, yeah.
Scott Lilienfeld wrote a great piece, Microaggression, Strong Claims, Inadequate Evidence. So there's inadequate evidence. They're going into positions of leadership and authority, as people with university degrees in general tend to do, not always, of course. And they're bringing these artifacts with them into the workplace. So it's a kind of a way that the ideology spreads itself throughout the society. So of course you should burn them down.
And also there's another aspect of it, which is they don't know anything positive. They only know things that are negative, right? So they don't have
grievances.
Yeah, exactly. They've just got grievances. Whereas a normal person would say, okay, well, to build a healthy human being, you have to behave in this sort of way. You have to work in this kind of, to this capacity to produce this kind of output. But actually, they don't have that. All they can say is, I'm against this, I'm against that, I'm against the other. It's like, okay, but you're not training them and habituating them into the ability to be actually positive and productive.
That's what the very idea of Paulo Freire's critical consciousness is. You're giving them a critical consciousness so they can identify oppression and remediate that oppression.
Yeah.
But the problem is
You need to create an order.
you need to create an order.
That's
The
the
whole
problem.
thing is illusory in the first place,
Yeah.
and it predicates itself on things that are simply untethered to reality.
But it also predicates itself on an existing order. Okay, well, let's say that everyone agrees, yeah, all the existing order is bad, and you've got to tear it down. Okay, but you've got nothing. You've got no tool set
Right.
with which to create a new order
Right.
for the people to go through and become better than they were to begin with. So you've just
Right.
abolished the concept of a standard
Right.
there, because they just, from within the sort of woke ideology, there is no standard.
Right. And in practical terms, what do you get? You get
Nothing.
Chaz.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
get
You
these.
get people in Portland with signs that have flames on them saying "Burn it all down," "Fuck Biden," "We want revenge."
Yeah.
From it said, "Burn it all down from the ashes, a world anew." But how do they build?
But what's the new world? You haven't.
They
got
don't
one.
even have trash collection.
Not only
what are
will
they
they
talking about?
Exactly.
Right, not only will they not prosper, but some of them can't even function, as Jonathan Haidt and Greg Luke point out in Coddling of American Mind.
The cognitive ability of these students has been decreased, and there's no mechanism for it to be increased. So it's just downwards.
The cognitive. So I'm going to go one step further than that.
Go ahead.
It's even worse than the
I
cognitive.
bet it is.
It's
And I thought that was bad enough.
Well, that was the most charitable thing you could say about it.
Yeah.
It's that they have removed the tools necessary for them to correct their beliefs.
Yes.
So you've them trapped them
Yes.
in an ideological framework or way of thinking of the world. They don't agree with discourse. They don't like dialogue. Those are tools of oppression. Those are tools of the heteropatriarchy. They have this is a way that the ideology buttresses itself from criticism.
Yeah.
And it is metastasized throughout the society. And it is, I say that it is a cognitive sickness. It is a mass delusion.
Yeah.
And pointing that out, the people go crazy on me, but it is actually true. You are robbing students of a way of a tool set that you can give them to figure out what's not even what's true, but what's more likely to be false. It's even more humble of a claim than that.
But even then, when you've got to that position, we're in the first generation of this being widespread. Right? This has always been a small thing in academia, but now it's broken through. Okay, we're in the first generation. Well, what does that look like going to the next generation? Man, if there's one thing that teachers are afraid of, it's Generation Z.
Yeah.
They're like, these people, these kids are thick. They can't read. They can't calculate. They can't reason.
Yeah.
They can't form an argument. They can't articulate why they are as they are. Okay, that's Generation 2.
Yeah.
What does Generation 5 look like?
Well,
You know,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so for that generation, what's the problem with plagiarism?
exactly.
I mean, everything that you just outlined, they just have reasons for not caring about it.
It's historical. I mean, sorry, we're just following the tradition of Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, like, every time I have almost any conversation, like literally with anybody, and I'll articulate a position like, well, people who obtain their degrees fraudulently should be fired. They'll say like,
Not controversial, I would have.
like, oh, you're some kind of conservative. Like, what are you
I guess
what
so.
are you talking about? Like every position like that, like the whole, when you were talking about everybody who is complicit in that,
Yeah.
the thing that was running through my mind, I don't necessarily want to take us down this rabbit hole, but I was thinking about the trans thing. Like, it's not enough that the surgeon lose their license. Like, everybody who participated in that sickness has to be held accountable. Like, we have to create systems in which there's accountability.
Yeah.
I mean, if not, we're like a kind of third world, not even third world. They don't say, they call it global south now. I don't know.
Well,
But,
yeah.
but if not, you've kind of created not even a house of cards or a house of straw, but
No,
you've really created
liquidated
an
everything.
opposite. Yeah.
You've liquidated everything down
Yeah.
to a sort of South African level where you've got rolling blackouts and you've got the majority of the population on welfare.
Yeah.
You've got all you've done is humiliated the
Yeah.
entire nation
Yeah.
and reduced everything to the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's atrocious. It's not conservative to not want that.
Correct.
Like, I would think that's just perfectly reasonable.
Or thinking about, and then we'll get
We'll get to it in a second.
Okay, but so then it's kind of like the same thing of when I moved out of Portland for safety reasons, but when they were destroying the city for like 300 days, I kept saying, like, you've got to arrest these people. Like, you cannot have, they're assaulting people, they're destroying businesses, and you're conservative.
Maybe.
What are you talking about? Like,
If that's what it takes to be a
Well, like-
conservative, then a lot of people are conservatives.
like, it was so crazy to me. And
Yeah.
so just piggybacking off of that, so there's somebody, the mayor of Portland is talking about public disgraces. He's
Yeah.
the quintessential public disgrace. Ted
Wheeler, isn't it?
Yes, correct. Ted Wheeler, he, him, his. I always make sure to put that in there. Pronouns are very important to the man.
Yep.
But the city commissioner, Renee Gonzalez, is running for mayor, and his car was firebombed. This is in the United States of America.
No, but this
by
is
Antifa.
No. It's not just in the United States of America. I mean, it's completely plausible that there are places in America where your car gets firebombed. This is in Portland.
Yeah, right.
One of the whitest, most affluent cities in the entire country.
Correct. And his car was firebombed because of so. This is not some right-wing maniac.
Yeah.
Like, this is an inveterate Democrat. This is a hardcore, never voted for, like me.
Yeah.
Like, he's well, I'm not an inveterate Democrat, but he's hardcore Democrat. But he wasn't left enough for the maniacs. But my point is, it's speaking back to the plagiarism thing, it's a kind of institutional capture and organizational corruption. Like, the governor, as far as I know, the governor of Oregon didn't come out and say anything. One of you guys can fact check that, but that wasn't in the local papers. It wasn't made a big fuss or big to do. Like, it is becoming a banana republic when people on one, and it really is true. I would love to tell you this is not true. One end of the political spectrum, it's not that they're just perpetrating violence against their political enemies. It's that people are afraid to make criticisms of that because they don't want to be seen on the right. But making a criticism of political violence does not make you someone on the right. In fact, Renee Gonzalez is on the left. So that argument doesn't even make sense. He's just, okay, he's not a crazy communist, but he's literally a left and he's a minority.
I think it's a much longer conversation to why
that
person is suddenly a conservative. So, but I mean, it really is, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah.
Because
Cool.
this has been mad.
Yeah.
But right. So
those are my predictions, by the way.
Yeah.
But I want you to hold me to those.
I'm happy.
I'm buying your dinner if they're under 5%. And if they're over 20%, man.
I'm not sure I agree to that. I mean, like,
I'm buying you dinner.
Yeah, I guess. But
okay, but if they're over 20%, your audience will take us out.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this episode on the wisdom of Chinese proverbs. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.